Good morning. My name is Michael Hollenstadt, and I'm representing Cereno Scientific to talk to you today about CS585 as a first-in-class compound targeting the IP receptor for thrombosis. Clot formation in the blood occurs when there's a vascular injury. Platelets are required for the formation of a hemostatic clot as they are the first cell to enter and prevent blood from leaking out of the vessel following that injury. Platelet activation and fibrin formation together form the core of a hemostatic clot. Thrombosis occurs when those platelets continue to activate and increase coagulation, thus recruiting additional platelets and leukocytes and eventually forming a thrombotic clot. Thrombotic clots block the flow of blood, resulting in damage to the heart, known as myocardial infarction, and the brain, known as stroke. Platelet regulation is the first-line therapy in preventing MI and stroke. And a number of therapeutic interventions already exist, including clopidogrel, targeting the purinergic receptor, aspirin, integrin inhibitors, as well as thrombin receptor inhibitors. All of these together have decreased morbidity and mortality by 26%. However, even with the advent of these interventions, which has significant health benefits, morbidity and mortality due to thrombotic events and bleeding remains a significant problem. Therefore, new therapeutic approaches are warranted that will further decrease platelet activation and prevent thrombosis, but not at the expense of increased bleeding, thus balancing the pendulum of hemostasis. CS585 was developed as a potent analog of 12-heterin in human platelets. 12-heteral was an endogenous metabolite we discovered in the lab that directly inhibits platelets by activating a receptor on the platelet known as the IP receptor, as you can see from the figure on the left. CS585 is highly potent and acts through the IP receptor. The way in which we were able to denote this was looking at VASP phosphorylation. What you can see in the bottom left is VASP is phosphorylated following the addition of CS585 and as low as 10 picomolar. If we look at the top right, we can see how does that translate to inhibition of platelet aggregation or clot formation. And you can see as low as 1 to 10 nanomolar, you can fully inhibit clot formation in human blood. If we look in the bottom right, we can see the biochemical intermediates, the integrin regulation, as well as granule secretion, both of which are essential for platelet activation and recruiting new platelets into the plug that ends up resulting in thrombotic event. And you can see that additional CS585 fully inhibits the integrin alpha-2b beta-3, P-selectin, which is released from the alpha granule, and CD63, which is released from the dense granule. CS585 selectivity is essential for development as a new target in thrombosis, as the FDA-approved IP receptor activators are known to have off-target effects of other prostaglandin receptors, such as DP1, EP2, and EP4. What you can see here is that inhibition of the IP receptor on the left fully inhibits CS585's ability to inhibit platelets, suggesting that it is selectively going through the IP receptor. To show that there are no off-target effects, we looked at the DP1 receptor in the center and the EP2 and EP4 receptors on the right, and inhibition of those receptors had no effect on the ability of CS585 to inhibit platelet aggregation. When we turn in vivo, we looked at an animal following a vascular injury. Platelets are labeled green, fibrin is labeled red, and what you can see in the upper left is in vehicle conditions following an injury, there's a massive and acute thrombus that forms following injury. Two different doses in the middle and right of CS585 show dose-dependent inhibition of the clot that forms. In the bottom, you can see a summation showing a more extensive dose response curve that CS585 can potently and dose dependently inhibit clot formation, and on the bottom right that this does not alter fibrin formation except at extremely high concentrations. Finally, we wanted to look at bleeding. Bleeding can be as deleterious as the clot it's meant to that you're trying to inhibit. So first we looked at thromboelastography. This is an assay used in the clinic, often in surgery departments, to determine the bleeding risk of a patient. And so in thromboelastography, we're looking at the amount of time it takes for whole blood to form a clot. And what you can see is that CS585 has no delay in reaction time and clotting time compared to control. That's the pink and the black. However, if we were to give rivaroxaban, a factor Xa inhibitor, you can see a significant delay in the amount of time it takes to initiate a clot. And that CS585 on top of rivaroxaban does not induce any further delay from rivaroxaban alone, confirming that under TEG conditions, that CS585 does not alter coagulation. If we look on the right, we're now moving to a mouse, and we look at the tail bleeding assay. And if we were to resect the end of the tail and measure the amount of time it takes for the blood to cease, we can see that CS585 at low or high doses does not induce any significant increase in bleeding time. So in summation, CS585 is a novel IP receptor agonist derived from 12-hetra. It's stable in human plasma and blood. It has selectivity for the IP receptor, resulting in inhibition of human platelet activation, and its potency is 1,000 to 100,000-fold more potent than the endogenous 12-hetra at targeting the IP receptor and regulating platelet function. Finally, it does not cause bleeding, as we see no difference in the tail bleeding time or coagulation time or amplitude by TEG. We can start now to think about CS585 as a potential therapeutic option for a number of blood disorders, including arterial thrombosis, atherothrombosis, immunothrombotic diseases, as well as heparin-induced thrombocytopenia and thrombosis, all of which are not adequately treated at this time. Thank you.